Imagine a world teetering on the brink, where the fate of nations hung on the audacity of men in flying machines. The year is 1943, and across the vast expanse of the Atlantic, a desperate struggle for air superiority is unfolding over the battle-scarred skies of Europe. It's a tale of courage, of innovation, and of the almost insurmountable odds faced by those who dared to fly into the heart of an enemy's fortress. Our story begins on a day etched into the memory of countless airmen, October 14th, 1943. The date reverberates with a chilling epithet. Black Thursday. On that fateful day, at 8th Air Force Headquarters in High Wycombe, England, the incessant clatter of teletype machines pierced the tense silence of the night. Each mechanical click, each whirring pulse of the machinery brought tidings of unimaginable loss. The messages scrolling across the paper strips were not just reports, they were eulogies in the making, painting a stark, horrifying picture of an air war gone terribly wrong. The numbers were brutal, stark, and utterly soul-crushing. 60 bombers lost in a single mission. 600 young men, husbands, fathers, sons, brothers, gone, either dead or missing, swallowed by the unforgiving European sky. This wasn't just a setback, it was a profound crisis. Colonel Curtis LeMay, a name that would become synonymous with strategic bombing, dispatched a message at 21:47 hours that night, its words heavy with the weight of experience and grim reality. Without long-range fighter escort, daylight bombing campaign unsustainable. Request immediate suspension of deep penetration missions. This wasn't a recommendation. It was an urgent plea, a stark acknowledgement that the very foundation of the United States Army Air Force's strategic bombing doctrine was crumbling. General Henry Hap Arnold, the visionary but often tough-as-nails commander of the Army Air Forces, reread the telegram, his gaze fixed on the grim statistics. He reached for the secure telephone line to Washington, undoubtedly preparing for one of the most difficult conversations of his career. The entire American strategy for winning the air war over Europe, which hinged on precision daylight bombing to cripple Germany's industrial capacity, hung precariously in the balance. The losses were simply unacceptable, mathematically unsustainable. Bomber crews, flying from their bases in England, faced a statistical certainty of death or capture. A full tour of duty comprised 25 missions. The average life expectancy of a B-17 Flying Fortress crew by October 1943 was a mere 15 missions. Think about that for a moment. Joining a bomber crew meant you were statistically unlikely to survive your full commitment. It was a death sentence cloaked in duty. What none of these high-ranking officials knew, however, was that the solution to their desperate dilemma was already in production. A silver bullet forged in the crucible of Anglo-American cooperation, though not yet deployed in sufficient numbers to make a difference. Within a mere 4 months, the tide of the air war would begin to turn dramatically. American fighters, once confined to the English Channel, would soon be seen hunting German interceptors directly over Berlin itself, the very heart of the Third Reich. The formidable Luftwaffe's meticulously constructed defensive system, a web of radar, flak, and highly skilled interceptors, would crumble under relentless pressure. This transformation would be spearheaded by a single aircraft, the P-51 Mustang, a machine that married British engineering brilliance with the unparalleled scale of American mass production. It wouldn't just escort bombers to the German capital, it would systematically dismantle the Luftwaffe, rendering it an ineffective fighting force. To truly appreciate the Mustang's impact, we must first understand the daunting challenge it faced. By late 1943, the German Luftwaffe had established a defensive system of extraordinary sophistication, a layered gauntlet stretching from the French coast all the way to Berlin. Picture this: 3 distinct defensive lines, each designed to inflict maximum damage on incoming bomber formations. The first line, positioned along the Channel coast, consisted primarily of agile single-engine fighters like the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and Focke-Wulf FW 190. Their mission was to engage and disrupt the bomber streams as they crossed into occupied Europe, peeling off stragglers and sowing chaos. Deeper into France and Belgium lay the second line, a terrifying array of twin-engine fighters such as the Messerschmitt Me 110 and Junkers Jo 88, often armed with devastating rockets and heavy cannons. These aircraft operated with a brutal efficiency, standing off beyond the range of the bombers' defensive machine guns, lobbing their rockets into the formations, forcing them to break up and become vulnerable. This tactic was particularly insidious because a tight bomber formation, with its overlapping fields of fire, was its primary defense. Once that formation dissolved, individual bombers became easy prey. Finally, protecting the German heartland was the third line, composed of the Luftwaffe's elite units, flying the latest and most advanced variants of the Bf 109G and FW 190A fighters. These pilots were the best of the best, highly experienced and often decorated aces, defending their homeland with ferocious determination. German radar stations, a marvel of wartime technology, tracked bomber formations from the moment they formed up over England. Ground controllers, with remarkable precision, vectored their fighters to intercept, orchestrating attacks with devastating effectiveness. The German defensive system functioned like a massive, deadly conveyor belt. Fighters would attack, expend their ammunition in a flurry of cannon fire and machine gun bursts, then peel away, landing at nearby airfields to refuel and rearm. Crucially, they would then take off again, often attacking the same bomber formation 2 or even 3 times during a single mission. Imagine the psychological toll on the bomber crews, fighting off one wave, only to see the same familiar shapes return, guns blazing minutes later. General Adolf Galland, the brilliant and ruthless commander of the German fighter forces, had refined these tactics to a deadly art form. His pilots had learned to exploit the B-17's weakest defensive zone by attacking head-on, a terrifying proposition for both attacker and defender. They concentrated their fire on squadron leaders, knowing that destroying the lead aircraft would disrupt the entire formation's bombing accuracy, thereby undermining the strategic purpose of the mission. The twin-engine fighters, as mentioned, would stand off, launching their rockets, each containing 90 pounds of explosives, from a safe distance, often scattering the bomber formations like startled birds. It was a perfectly synchronized, deadly ballet of destruction. This was the inferno into which American bomber crews were sent, day after day. The stakes were incredibly high, and the toll in lives was astronomical. The American High Command urgently needed a long-range fighter that could not only reach Berlin, but also fight effectively when it got there, and still bring its pilots home. Enter the North American P-51 Mustang, an aircraft born not of grand strategic planning, but of an unlikely convergence of British desperation and staggering American industrial capacity. In April 1940, as the Battle of Britain raged and the threat of German invasion loomed, the British Purchasing Commission approached North American Aviation with a straightforward request: build Curtiss P-40 fighters under license. The P-40 was a decent, if unspectacular, fighter, but the British needed numbers, and they needed them fast. However, James Dutch Kindleberger, North American's shrewd president, saw an opportunity. He made a counter-offer that would, quite literally, change the course of aviation history. His company, he asserted, could design and build a superior fighter from scratch in the same time frame it would take to merely tool up for P-40 production. It was an audacious claim, a bold gamble, but one rooted in the exceptional talent and efficiency of North American's engineering team. Just 102 days after the contract was signed, the prototype, designated NA-73X, took to the air for its maiden flight. This was an astonishing feat, a testament to the urgency of the war and the sheer ingenuity of American engineers. The aircraft incorporated revolutionary design features, most notably a laminar flow wing. This wasn't just a minor tweak. It was a groundbreaking aerodynamic innovation that significantly reduced drag at high speeds, making the Mustang exceptionally fast and fuel-efficient. The initial versions, powered by Allison engines, showed immense promise. They were fast, agile at lower altitudes, and had good range. But they suffered from a critical limitation. Their high-altitude performance was inadequate for escorting bombers over Germany, where enemy interceptors often lurked at higher elevations. The true transformation of the Mustang came with the infusion of British engineering genius. In April 1942, Rolls-Royce test pilot Ronald Harker flew a Mustang I. He immediately recognized the airframe's incredible potential, concluding that its only limiting factor was its power plant. Within days, Rolls-Royce began fitting a Mustang with their Merlin 61 engine, a magnificent piece of engineering featuring a two-stage supercharger. This was the same engine that had already revolutionized the performance of the legendary Supermarine Spitfire. The result was nothing short of miraculous. The Merlin-powered Mustang could now reach a blistering 441 miles per hour at 30,000 feet, an altitude where German fighters, with their less sophisticated superchargers, began to struggle. Equally critical was its range. With an internal fuel capacity of 269 gallons, the Mustang boasted a combat radius of 475 miles. But with the addition of external drop tanks, that radius extended to an astonishing 850 miles. Suddenly, Berlin, a daunting 580 miles from American bases in East Anglia, was within reach. The American-built version of the Merlin engine, the Packard WW2 1653, produced 1,190 horsepower at altitude, maintaining power output precisely where German fighters started to lose their edge. This combination of speed, altitude performance, and unparalleled range was precisely what the 8th Air Force desperately needed. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Hitchcock, Jr., the assistant military attaché in London, became the Mustang's most passionate and influential advocate. Hitchcock was no ordinary desk officer. A 10-goal polo player and a former pilot with the legendary Lafayette Escadrille in World War I, he possessed a rare blend of technical understanding and tactical acumen. He grasped both the engineering implications of the Mustang's capabilities and its revolutionary potential in aerial combat. His reports to General Arnold hammered home a critical point, one that resonated deeply within the beleaguered 8th Air Force. The Mustang could not only reach Berlin, but it could also fight effectively when it got there, and still have enough fuel to return home safely. This was a game-changer, promising to shatter the German defensive perimeter. Meanwhile, on the German side, Major General Adolf Galland, a true legend of the Luftwaffe, commanded Jagdgeschwader 26 when the first American bombers appeared over France in August 1942. A veteran of the Spanish Civil War, the Battle of Britain, and the brutal Eastern Front, Galland had accumulated 94 aerial victories by the time he was promoted to General der Jagdflieger, General of Fighters, in November 1941. He was a brilliant strategist, a fearless pilot, and a perceptive leader who understood the strategic implications of the American daylight bombing campaign better than most German leaders. Galland recognized that the Americans were attempting something the Luftwaffe had failed to achieve over Britain: the systematic destruction of enemy war production through precision bombing. If successful, this campaign would strangle Germany's ability to wage war, slowly but surely. The German fighter force defending the Reich in late 1943 consisted of approximately 800 single-engine and 150 twin-engine fighters. These numbers, though seemingly robust, masked a deeper problem: a rapidly diminishing pool of experienced pilots. The meat grinder of the Eastern Front consumed pilots at an alarming rate. To compensate for these catastrophic losses, training programs for new pilots had been drastically shortened, from a comprehensive 2 years to a mere 6 months. New pilots arrived at operational units with a woefully inadequate 110 to 150 hours of flight time, a stark contrast to the 250 to 300 hours typical of their American counterparts. This qualitative difference in pilot experience would prove to be a devastating Achilles heel for the Luftwaffe. Despite this, the German defenders possessed critical advantages. They fought over their own territory, which meant that damaged aircraft could often land safely, and pilots who bailed out could quickly return to combat. They could concentrate forces against specific raids, achieving local numerical superiority even when their overall numbers were inferior. Most importantly, they only needed to fly far enough to reach the bomber stream, while American fighters, before the Mustang, had to fly all the way from England and back, constantly battling fuel limitations. The desperate situation of the American bomber crews was tragically underscored by missions like the infamous Schweinfurt-Regensburg raid on August 17, 1943. The mission plan seemed brilliant in its complexity. 2 separate bomber forces would strike simultaneously at 2 critical targets: Schweinfurt's vital ball-bearing plants and Regensburg's Messerschmitt factory. The divided attack was intended to split German fighter resources, preventing them from concentrating against a single massive force. Adding to the tactical genius, the Regensburg force would continue south to North Africa after its bombing run, avoiding the deadly return flight over heavily defended German territory. That morning, 376 B-17s took off. The Regensburg force departed on schedule at 07 hours, a magnificent armada against the dawn sky. However, an unforeseen enemy intervened: fog. Persistent, thick fog delayed the Schweinfurt force for a crucial 90 minutes, utterly destroying the plan's careful timing. This delay proved catastrophic. German fighters that had engaged the Regensburg force now had ample time to land, refuel, rearm, and then take off again to attack the Schweinfurt force, which was now flying unescorted into the hornet's nest. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Byron, Jr., flying with the Regensburg force, later wrote a chilling account of the aerial combat, his words painting a vivid picture of the sheer terror. Swarms of fighters queued up for their attacks. Our formations began to dissolve as B-17s fell burning or exploding. the sky was filled with parachutes, debris, and tracer fire. The outcome was predictable and devastating. 60 B-17s lost, 600 men killed, wounded, or captured. The Luftwaffe had conclusively demonstrated that unescorted daylight bombing was simply unsustainable. The Americans were forced to suspend deep penetration missions for 6 agonizing weeks, while they frantically searched for a solution. But this suspension could not last. Intense political pressure, both domestic and from their British allies, demanded continued attacks on German war production. Intelligence reports indicated that Germany's ball-bearing production, though temporarily disrupted, had largely recovered from the August raid. Another strike on Schweinfurt was ordered, a grim testament to the strategic necessity, despite the immense human cost. On October 14, 1943, Black Thursday, 291 B-17s crossed the Dutch coast at 13 hours. The short-range escort fighters, the P-47 Thunderbolts, turned back at Aachen, their fuel exhausted. The bombers flew on alone, for another 200 harrowing miles to the target. The Luftwaffe's response was overwhelming, a tidal wave of destruction. Over 300 German fighters, coordinating their attacks in relentless waves, descended upon the unprotected bomber formations. Major Wilhelm Moritz, leading Jagdgeschwader 3, employed new and terrifying tactics. His fighters carried 210mm rockets, a weapon of sheer brute force, fired from beyond the range of the B-17's defensive guns. Each rocket contained 90 pounds of explosives, enough to destroy a heavy bomber with a single, pulverizing hit. First Lieutenant Robert McCallum, pilot of Paddlefoot, watched the attacks unfold with a dreadful fascination. His words convey the horror. They came from 12 o'clock high, 4 abreast, wings lit up with cannon fire. The rockets looked like aerial torpedoes trailing smoke. When they hit, the B-17 just disintegrated. Despite the horrific losses, the bombing results were paradoxically excellent. Reconnaissance photos showed severe damage to the ball-bearing plants, a testament to the unyielding courage of the bomber crews. But the cost was immense. 60 more bombers lost, with another 17 written off due to irreparable damage. 650 men became casualties. Among the survivors, morale collapsed. The daylight bombing offensive had reached its existential crisis point. The very future of the air war over Europe hung by a thread. It was into this abyss of despair and defeat that hope, in the form of the P-51 Mustang, finally arrived. The first P-51B Mustangs touched down at RAF Boxted in Essex on November 20, 1943. The 354th Fighter Group, though technically part of the 9th Air Force, was immediately placed under the operational control of the 8th Air Force, a clear indication of the urgency and the expectation placed upon this new aircraft. Many of the pilots in the group had trained on the P-39 Air Cobra and the P-47 Thunderbolt. Few had ever flown the Mustang before arriving in England. Major James Howard, commanding the 356th Fighter Squadron, conducted his first orientation flight on November 25th. The moment he advanced the throttle, he knew instantly that they had something truly special. At 30,000 feet, an altitude where the P-47 struggled, the Mustang still had power to spare, soaring with an effortless grace that belied its potent capabilities. December 1, 1943, marked the Mustang's combat debut, a fighter sweep over Belgium and France, a cautious first step. Just 5 days later, on December 5th, the group flew its first bomber escort mission. The results were immediate and dramatic. Bomber losses dropped demonstrably whenever Mustangs provided escort. The pattern was undeniable. The strategic landscape of the air war was about to undergo a profound transformation, not just through technology, but through a radical shift in command philosophy. Lieutenant General James Doolittle, a legendary figure, a former racing pilot, an aeronautical engineer, and the orchestrator of the daring Doolittle raid on Tokyo, assumed command of the 8th Air Force on January 6, 1944. Doolittle brought a fighter pilot's aggressive perspective to the bomber-dominated 8th Air Force. His very first visit was to 8th Fighter Command Headquarters at Bushy Hall. There, he noticed a sign in the operations room, a seemingly innocuous directive that encapsulated the prevailing defensive mindset. The first duty of 8th Air Force fighters is to bring the bombers back alive. Who put that up? Doolittle inquired. Major General William Kepner, commanding 8th Fighter Command, replied, "It was here when I arrived, General." Doolittle's response was swift, decisive, and revolutionary. "Take it down," he ordered. "Put up a new one." The first duty of 8th Air Force fighters is to destroy German fighters. This simple, yet utterly transformative order unleashed the full potential of the P-51 Mustang and fundamentally reshaped American fighter tactics. Previously, fighters had been tethered to the bomber formations, flying tight, weaving patterns directly above them, their primary directive being defensive escort. Doolittle, with his aggressive vision, freed them to hunt. Fighter groups were now empowered to fly ahead of the bombers, seeking out German fighters as they formed up for their attacks. They were encouraged to pursue retreating Germans, even to their airfields, strafing them on the ground. This wasn't merely escort. It was a pure offensive strategy, designed to achieve air superiority by systematically annihilating the enemy's fighter force wherever it could be found. Colonel Donald Blakesley, commanding the highly decorated 4th Fighter Group, embraced these new tactics immediately and enthusiastically. A former Eagle Squadron pilot who had flown Spitfires with the RAF, Blakesley possessed an innate understanding of fighter combat. He instituted new, more flexible formations, abandoning the rigid 3-plane elements for dynamic, aggressive 2-plane teams. He pushed his pilots to be relentless, to seek combat rather than passively waiting for it, to go for the throat. The era of defensive escort was over. The era of offensive air superiority had begun. The full implementation of this new, aggressive strategy culminated in Operation Argument, known to history as Big Week, a sustained air offensive launched in February 1944. For 6 days, the 8th Air Force from England and the 15th Air Force from Italy launched maximum efforts against German aircraft production facilities. Over 3,000 bomber sorties dropped 10,000 tons of bombs on aircraft factories, oil refineries, and other strategic targets. But the true battle, the decisive engagement, occurred not on the factory floors but in the air. P-51 Mustangs, now equipping 5 fighter groups, ranged deep into Germany, flying far beyond the previous limits of fighter escort. During Big Week, tales of extraordinary heroism emerged. On February 20th, Major James Howard, the same pilot who had instantly recognized the Mustang's potential, single-handedly defended a bomber formation against an onslaught of 30 German fighters for over 30 harrowing minutes, a feat of unbelievable skill and courage that earned him the Medal of Honor. His combat report, characteristically laconic, simply stated, "Saw enemy aircraft attacking bombers. Engaged same." This concise declaration belied the desperate, swirling dogfight that had occurred, the sheer audacity of one man against such overwhelming odds. The impact of Big Week on the Luftwaffe was catastrophic. They lost 355 fighters in aerial combat and another 150 destroyed on the ground, a devastating blow to their operational strength. More critically, 17% of the German fighter pilot force was killed. These weren't just numbers. These were the experienced veterans, the multi-victory aces, the leaders whose combat wisdom could not be replaced. Training programs could churn out new pilots, but they could not replicate the invaluable expertise needed to survive and fight effectively in the brutal arena of aerial combat. The psychological impact of American fighters, particularly the P-51 Mustangs, finally reaching Berlin cannot be overstated. Berlin was more than just a city. It was the heart of the Reich, Hitler's capital, the symbol of German power and invincibility. No single-engine Allied fighter had ever reached it before, and the very idea was considered a fantasy by many. But on March 4, 1944, Colonel Donald Blakesley led 81 P-51Bs of the 4th Fighter Group on that historic mission. The weather was terrible, with cloud cover extending from 2,000 to 28,000 feet. Navigation was by dead reckoning and time, a testament to the skill and daring of the pilots. The bomber stream stretched for miles, over 800 heavy bombers protected by nearly 900 fighters, a colossal aerial armada. Captain Donald Gentile, flying his legendary P-51 named Shangri-La, vividly recounted his encounter near Hanover. We dropped our tanks and dove on about 30 109s and 190s forming up below us. They scattered immediately. I caught one 109 and gave him a 3-second burst. He rolled over and went straight down. The Luftwaffe's response was fierce, but utterly disorganized. German controllers, in their disbelief, had not anticipated Allied fighters over Berlin. Radio intercepts captured their confusion and outright disbelief. Many German pilots refused to believe the P-51s were American aircraft. So unthinkable was their presence over the capital. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Oberhansley, leading the 358th Fighter Squadron, remembered the surreal experience of reaching Berlin. The flak was incredible at bomber altitude, but we were above it, looking down on this massive aerial battlefield. And we were there, American fighters over the German capital. It was a moment of profound symbolic and strategic significance. Just 2 days later, the 8th Air Force returned to Berlin in even greater strength. 660 B-17s and B-24s, escorted by 900 fighters, attacked targets in and around the German capital. Major General Adolf Galland, desperate to stem the tide, personally led Jagdgeschwader 1 into combat, flying his personal Focke-Wulf FW 190A8. Galland attempted to break through to the bomber formations, but he was intercepted by escorting Mustangs. His wingman was shot down before they could even reach firing range. The Luftwaffe lost 69 fighters destroyed and 26 damaged. American losses were 35 bombers and 11 fighters. The arithmetic was now clear and undeniable. The Luftwaffe could not sustain such losses, while the Americans, with their seemingly inexhaustible supply of aircraft and trained pilots, grew stronger each day. By April 1944, with 7 fighter groups now equipped with the P-51, 8th Fighter Command shifted fully to pure offensive operations. Fighters swept ahead of bomber formations, catching German fighters as they took off, before they could even gain altitude and organize. They stayed behind long after the bombers turned home, hunting Germans returning to their damaged bases. Colonel Hubert Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group, developed his ingenious Zemke's Wolf Pack tactics. His P-47 Thunderbolts, still formidable machines, would simulate a bomber formation's radio chatter, deliberately drawing German fighters into ambushes set by high-flying P-51s. This was psychological warfare, combined with tactical brilliance, turning the hunter into the hunted. On April 8, 1944, Lieutenant Robert Goebel, a future ace, shot down his 5th German fighter. He recounted, "We caught them taking off from Brandenburg. The inexperienced pilots would raise their gear and try to turn immediately. Their planes would stall and crash. The veterans would build speed first, but by then we were on them." This vivid anecdote perfectly illustrates the stark reality of the qualitative difference in pilot experience between the two sides. The American pilots, benefiting from superior training and equipment, were now ruthlessly exploiting the Luftwaffe's vulnerabilities. In May 1944, the strategic bombing campaign shifted its focus to a new, critical target: Germany's oil production. The P-51D model had begun arriving in April, an even more formidable version of the Mustang, featuring 6 50-caliber machine guns instead of 4, a distinctive bubble canopy for vastly improved visibility and enhanced performance. On May 12, 1944, 800 bombers attacked synthetic oil plants at Leuna, Bühlen, and Zeitz, escorted by an equal number of fighters. The Luftwaffe, in a desperate, last-gasp effort, launched everything it had available, over 500 fighters. The resulting air battle was, at that point, the largest in history. Major George Preddy, commanding the 487th Fighter Squadron, achieved multiple victories in the swirling chaos. He later described the battle. "They came up in massive formations. We'd dive through them, shooting, zoom back up, and dive again. It was controlled chaos, but we had the advantage." The Luftwaffe lost 126 fighters destroyed and 64 damaged. American losses were 46 bombers and 13 fighters. The trend was irreversible. While German aircraft production actually managed to increase in 1944, a testament to Albert Speer's organizational genius, the quality of their pilot force had utterly collapsed. New pilots, arriving with minimal training, rarely survived their first missions. This critical imbalance meant that, even with more aircraft, the Luftwaffe was effectively losing its ability to fight. The ultimate test of Allied air supremacy came on D-Day, June 6, 1944. Over 13,000 Allied aircraft, fighters, bombers, transports, supported the massive invasion. The Luftwaffe, once the terror of European skies, could manage only 319 sorties over the invasion beaches. Allied fighters claimed 42 German aircraft destroyed for the loss of 35 Allied fighters, a testament to their overwhelming dominance. Lieutenant Colonel John Meyer flew 3 missions on D-Day and reflected, "We owned the sky completely. We'd patrol over the beaches without seeing a single German aircraft, then fly inland, destroying German convoys trying to move in daylight." The Luftwaffe's near-total absence over Normandy represented not just a tactical defeat, but a complete strategic capitulation. Fighter units had been pulled back to defend the Reich. Those remaining in France lacked fuel, spare parts, and experienced pilots. By July 1944, the Luftwaffe had effectively ceased to exist as an effective fighting force. The statistics tell a clear and grim story for Germany. In January 1944, The Luftwaffe possessed approximately 2,395 single-engine fighters. By June, despite producing over 3,000 new fighters, their operational strength had plummeted to 123. Pilot losses were catastrophic. 2,262 fighter pilots lost in the first 5 months of 1944 alone. American fighter claims for 1944 totaled an astounding 5,954 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, with another 4,131 destroyed on the ground. The P-51 Mustang accounted for a staggering 4,950 of these victories. Mustang losses, while still significant at 2,520 aircraft, yielded a victory-to-loss ratio of nearly 2.1, a testament to its combat effectiveness. The transformation was truly remarkable. In October 1943, the 8th Air Force had been on the verge of suspending operations due to unsustainable losses. By June 1944, American bombers could attack virtually any target in Germany with acceptable casualties. The key difference, the singular factor that enabled this dramatic shift, was fighter escort. Specifically, the P-51 Mustang's unprecedented ability to accompany bombers deep into enemy territory. The destruction of the Luftwaffe had consequences that rippled far beyond the bombing campaign. Without air cover, German ground forces in Normandy were subjected to devastating, relentless tactical air attacks. Allied fighter bombers destroyed tanks, trucks, trains, and artillery with impunity. The German Army's mobility, historically its greatest tactical advantage, was effectively eliminated, severely hampering their ability to respond to the D-Day invasion. The Eastern Front suffered equally. Luftwaffe units desperately transferred west to counter the Allied threat were unavailable to support Wehrmacht operations against the Soviet Union. The Red Air Force, benefiting from this shift, achieved air superiority by mid-1944, contributing significantly to the catastrophic German defeats of that summer. German war production, despite Albert Speer's tireless efforts and organizational genius, could not overcome the cumulative effects of strategic bombing, especially once the P-51 had cleared the skies of interceptors. Oil production, the lifeblood of modern warfare, fell from 196,000 tons in May 1944 to a mere 30,000 tons in September. Aviation fuel production virtually ceased, a death knell for the Luftwaffe. Training flights were canceled for lack of fuel, and newly produced aircraft sat idle on airfields, mute testaments to a war machine slowly grinding to a halt. The psychological impact on German morale was profound. Cities deep within the Reich, once thought inviolable, were subjected to daylight precision bombing, and the Luftwaffe, once the proud symbol of German military might, could no longer protect its own civilians. This erosion of trust and confidence in their protective forces was a significant factor in the declining will to resist. The technological lessons learned during this period influenced military aviation for decades. The combination of high-altitude performance, long range, and heavy armament, so perfectly embodied by the P-51, became the new standard for fighter aircraft design. The importance of industrial capacity, robust training systems, and aggressive tactical innovation had been proven decisively. The P-51 Mustang represented more than just technological advancement. It demonstrated the decisive importance of industrial capacity in modern warfare. North American Aviation, a private company driven by wartime urgency and American ingenuity, produced an astonishing 15,000 Mustangs during the war, with peak production reaching an incredible 600 aircraft per month. This was a logistical and manufacturing marvel. German aircraft production, despite reaching record levels in 1944, simply could not match this output, especially while simultaneously struggling to replace losses on 3 active fronts and under constant bombardment. The Mustang also proved the immense value of international cooperation. British engineering genius, in the form of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, combined seamlessly with American mass production capabilities to create arguably the war's most effective fighter. The Packard Motor Car Company's ability to mass-produce the complex Merlin engine, initially a foreign design, demonstrated an extraordinary level of American industrial adaptability and manufacturing prowess. It highlighted how, under pressure, industrial capabilities could be rapidly repurposed and scaled. Training systems proved equally crucial to victory. American pilots arrived in combat with a robust 250 to 300 hours of flight time, trained safely in the United States with seemingly unlimited fuel and aircraft at their disposal. German pilots, their training constantly interrupted and degraded by Allied bombing and fuel shortages, often reached operational units with a perilous 110 to 150 hours of experience. This qualitative difference in pilot training, often overlooked in the glare of technological achievements, proved as important as numerical superiority in the skies. A superior aircraft in the hands of an inexperienced pilot is still vulnerable. The strategic bombing campaign's ultimate success depended almost entirely on effective fighter escort. Pre-war theories about self-defending bomber formations, with their interlocking fields of fire, proved disastrously wrong and cost thousands of lives. Bombers could indeed destroy enemy war production, but only if they were protected from interception. The P-51 Mustang provided that protection. Command philosophy, too, mattered decisively. Doolittle's tactical revolution, releasing fighters from the strict confines of close escort duty and empowering them to actively hunt the enemy, transformed the air war. By taking the offensive, American fighters forced the Luftwaffe to fight on American terms. German fighters could no longer pick and choose when and where to engage. They were hunted relentlessly, from their bases to their training grounds, until their numbers and their will to fight were broken. On April 25, 1945, the 8th Air Force flew its last combat mission of the European War. 370 B-17s, proudly escorted by 550 P-51 Mustangs, attacked railway yards in Czechoslovakia. Not a single German fighter challenged them. The Luftwaffe had truly ceased to exist. General Adolf Galland, in a poignant post-war interrogation, admitted the stark truth. The American long-range fighter was the decisive factor. Without escort, daylight bombing would have failed. With it, we were helpless. We could not defend our airspace, our cities, or our armies. His words resonate with the chilling clarity of a man who witnessed the inevitable. Hermann Göring's famous, desperate statement, "When I saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the war was lost," captured the profound psychological impact of their appearance. But his more detailed analysis proved even more revealing. Your bombers might have eventually succeeded through attrition alone, but the long-range fighter changed everything. It destroyed my fighter force not through gradual losses, but through systematic annihilation. This wasn't merely a defeat. It was an obliteration. The P-51's legacy extended far beyond World War II. It served with distinction in the Korean War, providing vital close air support when early jet aircraft lacked the range for extended operations. Foreign air forces, recognizing its enduring capabilities, flew Mustangs well into the 1980s. Decades later, Veterans of the Air War, both American and German, gathered for reunions, former enemies finding common ground in their shared survival of history's greatest air battle. A testament to the human spirit that transcended the conflict itself. Colonel Hubert Zemke, reflecting on the profound transformation, offered a succinct summary. In 1943, we were losing badly. The bombers couldn't survive without prohibitive losses. Then came the Mustang. Within 6 months, everything changed. It wasn't just the aircraft. It was the entire system of training, tactics, leadership, and industrial support. But without the Mustang's capabilities, none of it would have mattered. Today, the United States Air Force Museum proudly displays a beautifully restored P-51D, painted as Old Crow, flown by Major George Preddy, the highest-scoring Mustang ace with 26.83 victories. Visitors often wonder why this particular aircraft receives such prominence among the jets and spacecraft of later eras. The answer lies in its immense historical impact. The P-51 Mustang demonstrated unequivocally that technological superiority, coupled with unparalleled industrial capacity and the unwavering courage of its pilots, could achieve the seemingly impossible. It proved that air power, when employed decisively and strategically, could be a truly decisive factor in modern warfare. Most importantly, it showed that democratic nations, even when faced with existential threats, could rapidly produce the weapons and train the warriors capable of defeating tyranny. The transformation from Black Thursday to air supremacy took less than 6 months. In October 1943, American bombers faced annihilation. By April 1944, American fighters dominated German skies. The catalyst was a single aircraft type, combining the best of British and American engineering ingenuity, a truly transatlantic triumph. Today, historians continue to debate the effectiveness and morality of strategic bombing, a complex ethical discussion that remains highly relevant. But none dispute the decisive impact of fighter escort on the campaign's success. Without the P-51 Mustang, the combined bomber offensive, a cornerstone of Allied strategy, would likely have failed. With it, Allied air power played a crucial role in destroying Nazi Germany's ability to wage war, hastening the end of the conflict. The arithmetic of war, once so grim, was profoundly altered. In 1943, the 8th Air Force lost 1 bomber for every ton of bombs dropped. By mid-1944, that ratio improved dramatically to 1 bomber for every 40 tons delivered. The difference in these numbers was measured not just in tons of ordnance, but in thousands of lives saved. General Karl Spaatz, commanding United States Strategic Air Forces in Europe, offered the final, unequivocal assessment. The P-51 was the weapon that won the air war over Europe. Everything else, bombers, crews, ground support, intelligence, would have been wasted without fighter escort to target. The Mustang gave us that capability. In the skies over Germany, young men in P-51 Mustangs defeated the formidable Luftwaffe and secured Allied victory, a feat that once seemed unimaginable. Their achievement ensured the success of D-Day, enabled the relentless bombing campaign, and undeniably hastened the end of World War II in Europe. The Mustang had done more than merely provide fighter escort. It had changed the course of history. The concrete runways of former 8th Air Force bases, once alive with the roar of Merlin engines, now serve civilian purposes or have, in some places, returned to farmland. The pilots who flew Mustangs, the greatest generation of airmen, are slowly passing into history. But their achievement endures. a timeless testament to the power of technology fused with courage to overcome impossible odds. At the Duxford Air Museum in England, a beautifully restored P-51D regularly flies demonstrations. The distinctive, throaty sound of the Merlin engine and the graceful, elegant lines of its laminar flow wings remind visitors of an era when such aircraft represented the pinnacle of aviation design and performance. Children watch in wide-eyed wonder, captivated by the spectacle, while veterans remember when squadrons of Mustangs filled the European skies, a silver swarm of liberation. The museum guides explain the specifications, the combat records, the raw data. But the P-51's true legacy transcends mere statistics. It lies in the profound transformation from defeat to victory, from desperate defense to overwhelming offensive power, a symbol of hope born from desperation. America's P-51 Mustang overwhelmed the Luftwaffe through more than just technical superiority. It succeeded through a powerful convergence of international cooperation, unprecedented industrial might, brilliant tactical innovation, and, above all, unwavering human courage. Faced with catastrophic losses and the specter of strategic failure, the United States Army Air Forces adapted, innovated, and ultimately triumphed. The Mustang was the instrument, the tangible embodiment of this victory, but the ultimate success belonged to the entire system that produced it. A system that could recognize problems, develop ingenious solutions, and implement changes with astonishing speed and effectiveness under the immense pressure of total war. As the last veterans of that era pass, their legacy remains vivid. Technological superiority, when properly conceived and brilliantly employed, can achieve decisive victory. The P-51 Mustang's ability to reach Berlin didn't just save the daylight bombing offensive. It validated American military doctrine and irrevocably established air supremacy as an absolutely essential prerequisite for modern military operations. The Luftwaffe, which had terrorized Europe from 1939 to 1943, was systematically reduced to impotence by a single aircraft type and the strategy it enabled. The same nation that pioneered the devastating concept of strategic bombing at Guernica now cowered under Allied attacks, unable to protect its cities or its armies from the relentless aerial onslaught. The numbers tell part of the story. Nearly 5,000 German aircraft destroyed in the air, hundreds of thousands of tons of bombs delivered, a combat effectiveness that exceeded all pre-war predictions. But the true impact lay in what was prevented: the catastrophic collapse of the bombing offensive, the potential prolongation of the war, and countless additional Allied deaths. When Colonel Donald Blakesley led his Mustangs over Berlin on March 4, 1944, he demonstrated, in the most unmistakable terms, that American power could reach the very heart of enemy territory. The sight of American fighters, emblazoned with their distinctive markings, flying freely over the Nazi capital, sent an unmistakable, visceral message throughout occupied Europe. Liberation was coming. The technological achievement itself was remarkable. In less than 4 years, North American aviation designed, tested, refined, and mass-produced an aircraft that not only matched but decisively exceeded the performance of fighters developed over twice as long by other nations. The seamless integration of the Merlin engine, accomplished in a matter of months rather than years, demonstrated the incredible urgency and adaptability driving wartime innovation. Even the pragmatic and initially controversial addition of a fuselage fuel tank, extending the Mustang's range to Berlin despite stability concerns, showcased ingenious problem-solving under immense pressure. But technology alone didn't defeat the Luftwaffe. It was the young men, with an average age of just 22, who mastered these complex aircraft, learned sophisticated new tactics, and engaged in brutal combat at altitudes where temperatures plummeted to minus 50 degrees Celsius. They flew in formations of hundreds, maintaining precise positions while constantly scanning for enemies, meticulously monitoring their instruments, and carefully managing their precious fuel. A single moment of inattention, a lapse in judgment, often meant death. The German pilots they faced were equally brave, defending their homeland against increasingly overwhelming odds. By 1944, many flew their third or fourth aircraft type, each with different characteristics, constantly adapting to new challenges. They faced Americans by day, British by night, and Soviets in the east, operating from airfields under constant attack, with dwindling supplies of fuel and spare parts. The human cost on all sides was staggering. The 8th Air Force alone lost 26,000 killed, with another 28,000 becoming prisoners. The Luftwaffe lost approximately 40,000 pilots, mostly in the war's final 18 months, a truly devastating toll. Each loss represented a personal tragedy, families destroyed, potential unrealized, a generational scar. Yet, from this profound tragedy emerged a lasting transformation. The P-51's success proved beyond a doubt that air superiority was not merely desirable, but absolutely essential for modern military operations. Ground forces could not operate effectively, or even survive under enemy air attack. Naval forces required robust air cover. Strategic bombing, the cornerstone of Allied air doctrine, absolutely demanded effective fighter escort. These hard-won lessons, forged in the skies over Germany, shaped military doctrine for generations, influencing every subsequent conflict. The end came swiftly, unexpectedly so. In January 1944, the Luftwaffe, though battered, remained a formidable force. By June, it was demonstrably broken. By September, it existed largely on paper, a ghost of its former self. The sheer speed of this collapse testified to the effectiveness of the American strategy and the P-51's decisive, pulverizing impact. 8 decades later, certain lessons from the P-51 Mustang's story remain crystal clear, as relevant today as they were then. Technological superiority, properly conceived and applied, can indeed overcome significant geographic disadvantages. The Mustang's unparalleled range negated Germany's strategic depth, effectively shrinking the vast European theater. Industrial capacity matters profoundly in prolonged conflicts. America's ability to produce thousands upon thousands of Mustangs, while simultaneously building fleets of bombers, training legions of pilots, and supplying its allies, proved utterly decisive. Tactical innovation, as demonstrated by Doolittle's offensive fighter employment, multiplies technological advantage, transforming a defensive weapon into an offensive spearhead. Most importantly, the P-51's success demonstrated a democratic nation's remarkable ability to mobilize effectively and rapidly for total war. The aircraft was designed by a private company that, just a few years prior, had never built a fighter. It was powered by a foreign-designed engine, mass-produced by an American automobile company, and flown by citizen soldiers who were civilians only 3 years earlier. This monumental achievement testifies to the inherent strength and adaptability of a democratic society when faced with existential threats to its very way of life. The P-51 Mustang's legacy extends far beyond its military achievements. It represents American innovation, industrial capability, and an unyielding determination. It symbolizes the enduring strength of the Anglo-American alliance that proved so decisive in the darkest hours of the 20th century. Most fundamentally, it embodies the courage of young men who flew into hostile skies and prevailed through a potent combination of skill, unwavering determination, and a profound technological advantage. As military aviation enters the age of unmanned systems and increasingly complex digital warfare, the P-51's lessons remain acutely relevant. Technology provides incredible capability, but human judgment ultimately determines its application. Industrial capacity enables military power, but strategic vision directs it. And international cooperation, when forged in shared purpose, multiplies national strength exponentially. The story of America's P-51 Mustang defeating the Luftwaffe is, at its heart, a story of profound transformation through relentless innovation. Faced with strategic failure and the grim prospect of defeat, the United States adapted, learned, and ultimately triumphed. The Mustang was the magnificent instrument of this victory. But the true triumph belonged to the comprehensive system, one capable of recognizing monumental problems, developing brilliant solutions, and implementing radical changes under the suffocating pressure of total war. The P-51 Mustang ended the Luftwaffe's reign over Europe, enabled the crucial invasion of Normandy, and significantly shortened World War II. In doing so, it saved countless lives and demonstrated for all time that technological superiority, combined with immense courage and industrial might, could indeed overcome any challenge. This profound lesson, learned in the fiery crucible of the skies over Germany, remains as relevant today as it was when American fighters first appeared over Berlin, forever changing the course of history.